Fears of an agenda to disarm private citizens are growing along with jaw-dropping allegations of criminal activity or alleged criminal activity by top cops. With me is Jonathan Deal, the founder of Safe Citizen. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chris. Nice to be with you.
Jonathan, you are very concerned that the public is not properly and fully informed on public safety. May we start by you informing them properly on what they should really know about the Firearms Control Amendment Bill?
Chris, thank you for that. I think we can definitely agree that people are often hearing the words public safety, but not necessarily making the connection or understanding where the foundation of public safety lies. And they can consistently hear calls for more restrictions, apparently and according to our government, to make them safer, but actually not enough about how those restrictions may affect their constitutional right to lawful self-defense and effective private security. Now, the debate in South Africa can be polarized, and it sometimes does become polarized, around owning a firearm or not owning a firearm. And this is not what it's about. Essentially, I think that if we can agree in a rational society that a lawfully owned firearm is an intrinsic part of a civilized society, and that in good hands, in competent hands, it can be something positive for the community, we could probably agree that a move to disarm South Africans, and there are a number of elements moving in this environment at the moment in legislative circles in South Africa, moves to disarm South Africans or affect their ability to become lawfully armed are effectively very, very serious. You and I have had discussions already around the Firearms Control Amendment Bill, and we don't know when it's going to appear, but we're pretty convinced that it's going to appear it could be in weeks or months, but certainly during this year, that it will be presented to and debated in Parliament. And it is a significant risk to public safety in terms of the fact that for many South Africans, a lawfully owned firearm, either in their own hands or in the hands of the security industry, is actually their mainstay of security, particularly in the absence of the ability of the state to look after them.
If it were to become law, what would the effect be on the average South African gun owner or person who wishes to own a gun?
Well, most definitely, it would hamper and almost completely impede the ability of people who would decide at some point in time that they would like to become lawfully armed to actually acquire a licensed firearm. The millions of firearm owners who are currently licensed and who rely on the comfort and protection of their licensed firearm to defend themselves and their family would be affected because they would be hampered in the renewal of their self-defense firearms. The amendment bill at this point in time is looking to almost completely strip us of the opportunity to own firearms for self-defense. And constitutionally, we are actually permitted and guaranteed the right to effective self-defense, to freedom from all forms of violence. And that is essentially the worst thing that would happen from a self-defense point of view. And there would be an enormous impact on the other aspects of lawful firearm ownership, whether hunting, sport shooting, collecting. And these are all things that contribute a lot of money to the economy in this country. So it's not just purely a gun argument. It has many elements that should concern the South African public.
And why should ordinary South Africans be concerned about proposed firearm regulation for the private security industry?
Well, I think that we could say, unless you live in the desert or in a lighthouse today, either you or somebody in your family has right now, in this morning, been protected even vicariously by a security officer that is lawfully in possession of a firearm, whether he might even have been parked at the same traffic light while you were waiting for it to turn green, and his mere presence there protected you from being hijacked or facing some form of violent crime. The security industry itself is between 4 and 5 times the size of the South African Police Services, and they are stepping into a gap, a vacuum that has been left by the state in its duty to protect and serve the South African public. So the security industry is absolutely vital. There are millions of people who rely on so-called armed response, and we know many millions more who, if they could afford it, would certainly have it. So I can't understand why an organization that itself, or a state, a government that itself is beleaguered at so many levels in the South African Police Service, would go and meddle and fiddle with things where the public at least have some measure of protection, even if they're providing it themselves.
And what should the public know about proposed changes to firearm training?
That was one of the other issues that has come to the fore recently, is that there is a proposed change in the years since 2012, when the South African Police Services actually asked the private industry to stand up and create a quality assurance platform to manage the firearms proficiency training environment. That became known as the Professional Firearm Trainers Council. And subsequent to 2012 or 2013, the PFTC has certified more than 3.5 million individual unit standards. In other words, it has provided proof to the South African Police Services, or facilitated the public to provide proof to SAPs that they have been properly trained and lawfully trained according to a SAPS-approved system. And SAPS uses that information when they are evaluating the competency of a person to be given a competency to possess a firearm and eventually to apply for a license. That system now is being eyed by the QCTO, which is known as the Quality Council for Trades and Occupations, which falls under the Department of Higher Education and Training, in terms of replacing that training with a skills-based program. Now, most of us know that there are many hundreds of unit standards in the old training systems that are being changed from unit standard to skill-based training, and we don't necessarily have a problem with that. In fact, the Professional Firearm Trainers Council has already created a very solid model for this transition to take place. The issue, Chris, that's concerning us and that should concern the public is that there is a division, an internal division in SAPS called the SAPS Internal Training Division, that would like to be involved and has been involved in bolstering the QCTO move to get rid of the Professional Firearm Trainers Council out of this environment and replace it with what I kindly call a band of disillusioned brothers and a group of people that have got no business in managing the training that underpins public safety. And that is an enormous risk. There was a D-Day on June the 30th, which in fact is the date that Safe Citizen will be presenting a critical review of this whole issue to the government, and we'll be launching that in an interview with Biz News on that day. And the change of that date now has gone from the 30th of June for these skills programs to the 30th of December, which makes me very concerned. Because every time this government wants to push some regulation ahead, they do it to coincide with the end of the year, when the attorneys, the legal counsel, the business people, and indeed most South Africans are enjoying their holidays, so that we all wake up in January with a changed regimen. Safe Citizen is not going to, we're not taking our foot off the gas, and we're not going to relax the pressure on that. So the public need to watch this space, and they need to get involved in it.
Jonathan, in an ideal world, we wouldn't be so concerned about arming ourselves and protecting ourselves. We would be able to rely on the police force to do so. But we are continuing to hear startling testimony of alleged criminal activity by top cops, some of whom have been suspended. And now Major General Feroz Khan has been subpoenaed to appear before the Madlanga Commission on July 1. One of the allegations being that he received political protection from Commander-in-Chief of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Julius Malema, and in return leaked sensitive information from crime intelligence to him.
Yeah, 100%, Chris. I think that if one just watches the news on a daily basis, literally on a daily basis, there are more revelations of senior generals being arrested. Around this Medicare thing, there is an enormous amount going on. And the public is still reeling from the revelations of the Madlanga Commission, the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Commission. And certainly it appears that the government has lost control of this critical environment. Personally, my view is that, and I've said this on interviews with you before, that our police service has become politicized. It is used as a political football. And now we are seeing and hearing allegations, let's call it allegations at this point in time, of political interference, not even from members of necessarily the government at a high level, but leaders of political parties who are gaining access to the most sensitive crime intelligence information at the highest levels, and swapping that off in a quid pro quo. I don't want to speculate more on that until we have more facts, but it is probably this one issue that is dominating the media around the leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Julius Malema, and General Feroz Khan, is absolutely the best example that we could use to illustrate how critical and how critically worrying this should be for the public.
Thank you. That was Jonathan Deal, the founder of Safe Citizens, speaking to Biz News. I'm Chris Steyn. Thanks for joining us again, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chris.
Start your day a step ahead. Biz News Insider. It delivers the business stories that matter every morning straight to your inbox, sharp, fast, and free. Subscribe now. In uncertain times, good information is priceless. The Biz News Conference is heading back to the Drakensberg. Join me, Alec Hogg, from the 11th to the 14th of August for BNC 9, Champagne Sports Resort, where it all began, and where our community gathers for honest conversations, smart investing insights, and direct access to some of South Africa's sharpest minds. Come and rub shoulders with the best we've got. 28 keynote speakers, 3 days. Seats are available now. Book your seat by clicking the link in the description.